Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course talk about video games. And boy, do I got a good one for you guys today. So this is part 2. So if you have not watched Antithetical Audience, this is going to completely tie into this, and I'll bring it around toward the end. Hopefully, if I remember, because this might be a little long. As you can see, I got a lot of tabs open, but yeah, this is part 2. So yeah, we'll also watch Antithetical Audience. I'll try to remember to link this down below or have it at the end screen at the end, something like that. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into this. So black hole games, what are they? They're basically games that soak up the majority of the playtime and the majority of the revenue. And it's really the pursuit of greed through the companies, again, to continue to live service and microtransaction as much as they can, and even to the point of bringing in like subscription services now on top of it all, just like Rainbow Six Siege. And so a lot of money goes in, a lot of time goes in, but nothing really comes back or stays with you with the passing of seasons or with the shutting off of servers, like with the Crew or like with Babylon's Fall or Godfall or Concord or whatever these other things. As soon as they go offline, you've just missed it. And a lot of times you're also not allowed, even though the servers are on, to not bring over the cosmetics that you've also accumulated over that time. And so the grind just starts all over again. And so you really don't have anything. It's not really that satisfying at the, in the long run over years of playing the same thing. And so, yeah, it gets incredibly frustrating. But black hole games are ultimately what publishers are pushing for in trying to broaden their audience because, again, they have the setup and then they can also continue to push more audience. And this is where the antithetical audience actually comes in, an audience that was not originally intended for the genre or the IP at the time it was created. So the old eventually feels neglected and gets pushed out, and the new audience comes in and enjoys it, but isn't as attached as they used to be. But yeah, if you haven't watched Antithetical Audience, it's there for you. And so yeah, this black hole game, it's the money and the time. And I want to share this. This is off of Mystic's channel, and he keeps up with a lot of PlayStation stuff. And the thing that's kind of insane is PlayStation just had an SIE meeting for Sony Interactive Entertainment, and they showed the PlayStation side, and this is the PlayStation store, and this is looking at where revenue is coming from. And so taking a look at these 10 different IPs or areas, this is their revenue over 50%. And then the rest of the catalog is getting the rest of that revenue out of 100%. And every year they have more and more games, but it doesn't seem to matter because, again, all of this revenue is going into these few IPs like Roblox or FC or Fortnite or Genshin Impact or College Football, Grand Theft Auto, etc. And this has got to be frustrating because, again, these are why we call them black hole games. They are just sucking up the time and they're sucking up the revenue. And this is why these companies keep pushing for these live services. They want to try to find another black hole game. The problem that they are fighting is that they have to take players in these black hole games and move them to their own. So they really need to provide something pretty amazing in order to actually do that. And most of the time they don't. If we take a look at what PlayStation and Xbox players are currently playing, is this may not be the most recent, but pretty close. But yeah, Call of Duty's at the top. Fortnite is next. Grand Theft Auto Remastered and Roblox, 2K25, Minecraft, Marvel Rivals is there. And again, if you have a free-to-play game, that really helps out a lot. Kind of break through all of the others. Madden and NBA 2K. There's Veilguard, though that was free that month. So sorry, guys, that sucks. Avowed was there. Rocket League is another one. WWE games, Forza Horizon or Monster Hunters. And all of these generally have some aspect, including Legion, of some kind of microtransaction or live service thing. And this is what these companies keep pushing for over and over again. But ultimately, if you don't have a game that can really kind of penetrate in through these black hole games or through these other live services that have already been established, then if your game isn't at least an 8 or 9 or a 10 out of 10, your game isn't really going to have a ton of penetration. And this is why I believe exclusivity is really disappearing and why things are going more multi-platform, including Helldivers. Because ultimately, it's like if you can't get the sales that you need, like Capcom has said, Xbox, PlayStation, Square Enix, Embracer Group, you name it, they're all basically saying and sharing the same thing, including EA and Ubisoft, is that they need this revenue to be coming in, and if they're not able to get that, then as they are today cannot be sustained. And this is why we're seeing the closures. This is why we're seeing the canceled games. This is why we're seeing the layoffs. Since 2022, we're like 4 years into this layoff season now, and I think we'll continue to have layoffs through 26 and even 2027, which is pretty insane. Newer games, if they can actually get on a service, they have a better chance, like Expedition 33, Siege, Rainbow Six Siege X, Another Crab's Treasure, Power Wash Simulator, which I don't think that one's ever going anywhere. But yeah, when the launch fails, you're more likely to make a deal with the service, whether it's PlayStation Plus or Game Pass. And that way, your playtime actually transitions into actual money for your company. And there's also money up front, too. And if you continue to have that playtime and continue to help the service get playtime and subscribers and everything, then you continue to stay on the service and get money, too. So it's a mutual benefit for stuff to necessarily not be exclusive. It's the same with sales. If you can get your game on more platforms, you're going to sell more. And that's just how it works. It's the same reason, too, why you have discounts. It's, again, to get more players to come in. And that's ultimately what all of these publishers are trying to get done, is more revenue through the door. And so, yeah, again, with this focus of live service, this is why we got to see, too, with some single-player games turning multiplayer, which didn't really make a ton of sense, like The Last of Us and God of War. Sony has had roughly 13 projects now that have been canceled or have failed, and there's probably another 3 more on the horizon, which is going to be Marathon, Fair Games, and also Project Gummy Bears. And they've all just focused on those live service because, again, they're trying to find this black hole game that can suck in the time and suck in the revenue. And some companies, they're so incredibly big, they have to have live service. It's not an option just to go make stories anymore, even at a cheaper cost, even at like lower quality graphics or whatever, and content that doesn't have to continue to be made or running or operating servers. All of that can really make a game a heck of a lot cheaper. Like Expedition 33 was, I think, around $40 or $45 million to make. Same with Black Myth Wukong, and I'm sure Wu Chang is roughly the same thing, Fallen Feathers. These are cheaper games that are well under $100 million, and those are sustainable. And if it is successful, then they continue to make DLCs for them, like Liza P, and continue to actually make more sales. But again, yeah, if the live service model doesn't really work, then we have the layoffs and the closures and the canceled games. And so really there's not enough demand anymore. And this is where like everyone is trying to get the competition. And it's also between games, it's also between YouTube and other social media and accounts and TikTok. Like there's only so many, and the reason why I bring this up is that it's not just video games anymore. It's all of these other things too, jiving for your time. Is because ultimately what we're starting to get to is while these games or the IPs are making pretty good money, they're now competing with smaller generations. The biggest one right now is millennials. Baby boomers were pretty big, but some of them are passing away. But yeah, millennial is the biggest generation right now. And, well, no, I guess I got to take that back. Well, Gen Z gets a little longer. That's unfair. But anyway. But Gen Z is pretty big, and they had a few more years, I guess. But also we have Gen Alpha, I think, in here a little bit. And Gen Alpha, oh man, I want to say Gen Alpha started in like 2017 or something like that, or 2015. It's somewhere in there. It's not exactly a perfect science. So yeah, Gen Z isn't quite as big as this is showing. I should have looked into that a little more. But yeah, when we go through the breakdowns, the younger generations, they're basically done because betas are starting this year. And so Gen Alpha is done having its amount, and so is Gen Z, and they're smaller generations than millennials. And we also have declining birth rates all around the world, except for basically a good chunk of Africa. The birth rates are incredibly high, and what's healthy is probably having somewhere between 15 or 20 births per thousand. Somewhere in there. But as you can see, for a lot of these countries, it's actually quite small. You'd probably want a good 25. That would probably be healthy. Another way to look at it is fertility rates. And you probably want 3 kids per 2 parents so that the population can actually grow. Because when you're actually less than that, well, then you're not going to be having a bigger population. And the reason this matters is that that population grows up, becomes adults, gets a job, they start spending money. But if you have less consumers than you did the previous generation, very slowly you're going to see this transitional change where there's just less money actually going in because you have less spenders. And two, the biggest time in people's lives where they spend the most money is usually when they have families. And right now, for millennials, only 30% are married and have children. And that's not great. And roughly, 40 to 50% split for, I think it's, roughly 30 to 40% for the others. But yeah, it's not great for like the family unit because that is when you spend most of your money. But yeah, there's just not enough push here. So there is a little bit more disposable income because of that. But again, with only 30% being married and having kids, there's just not a lot of spending going on. And part of the reason for this too is because of the shrinking middle class. And so as we can see, this is older. This is really a nice representation, but it is older. This only goes to 2013, but this starts in 67. So as you can see, lower class, which is like poor folks, which I've lived in before, basically until 2000 was declining and it started going up again in 2000. Middle class has been declining ever since, and upper class has been increasing again until 2000, and it has been declining a little bit. Now, there's various factors for this, but generally speaking, we can say that the middle class is shrinking, and the middle class is what sustains the economy. It's where the majority of people actually are. And again, it's where they spend the most for retail, they spend the most on vehicles, food, entertainment, etc. And the reason all of this is important is that if the middle class is shrinking, maybe in a way, this is kind of why older video games are what people play. And again, focus on these black hole games, and this is where most of the revenue is going. Because while some of these microtransactions are, of course, expensive, they're still cheaper than a full $70 or $80 game. And if we have smaller generations coming up with lower birth rates and worse fertility rates, well, the biggest gaming demographics are basically in China, which is super, super weak, also in Europe, and also in the United States. United States is the biggest buyer of video games by country and even by region. And so if we have smaller populations for the bulk of our gamers, then this is why these companies are trying to find these black hole games. And they're willing to change anything, including casualizing the IP multiple iterations through multiple games to eventually swap out the old audience for a new one. Because they're trying to do anything they can to get money through the door. Because when we look year over year, maybe it goes up, maybe it goes down. But when we look at a trend of roughly the last decade, or for those of us that have been playing games for roughly 30 years, like myself, we can certainly see the trend and remember how times were in the 90s and 2000s and 2010s and now in the 20s to where, like, you know what? Things are kind of a little different. Things don't feel better, they feel worse. And while we do make technically more money than we did back when, we have less buying power because of that inflation. And that inflation is what everybody is fighting. And these companies are having their layoffs, having their closures, and their canceled games. And why they're just focusing on stuff that they know sells the best is because there's just not enough money to go around. And this isn't just because of COVID. This has been a long-term problem. And all COVID did was just accelerate it. And so this is why these black hole games are so important. And while they'll continue to try to make live service, why they'll continue to create ever creative ways of more expensive microtransactions, season passes, subscription services, early access, for 2 or 5 days early for another $30, premium content, which again is just some magic whatever they don't get to carry over next year. I personally don't like live service because I remember what games used to be. But again, we also have generations that have never experienced what live service is. really before Fortnite, or people don't remember. And now we're getting to a point where things are just more digital. Companies have more control. And so, yeah, they don't want their games to live forever because they want you to buy the next one. This is why The Crew was taken offline by Ubisoft, is because they want you to buy The Crew too. And why they want you to buy The Crew Mutterfest. So there is some pushback. There is some fight going on between consumers and between these publishers. And so we need to keep our headspace about that and be aware of what's going on. But this is really kind of the big picture. There's just not enough money to go around. And this problem will continue to get worse. We'll continue to have smaller generations around the world, lower birth rates, generally speaking, and less consumers in the future, with inflation being higher than it is today. And inflation always accelerates faster than wages does. That's always a losing battle. So thanks for tuning in, folks. You can always follow me at Gaming Garbage 22 over at YouTube. Also, don't forget our playlist. There's a lot of stuff that I do there on the channel. And also, you can find me over at Twitch at Don't Tread on the. And yeah, when I'm playing video games, I'll chat with you guys. Absolutely. But yeah, I want you guys to think about this, because when you start looking at this whole thing entirely, it kind of starts to make sense of like, oh, this is why they don't listen to us, because they're trying to figure out how to get more money out of the younger generations. Because really, if you're a millennial or if you're a Gen Xer, you just kind of buy what you want, and you're not really going to be like, marketing isn't really going to work on you too much. But with the younger generations, live service and black hole games is all they know. But to get them out of the games they've already invested in and they already know is really, really difficult, because that's where the time and the revenue goes. So with that, folks, we'll see you guys on the next one.